Behind the scenes of Mike LaFleur hiring his first Arizona Cardinals coaching staff, we go to the newest Cardinals insider crushing it all along the way. Matt Zenitz of CBS Sports joins us. And of course, hit that like, subscribe to PHNX Sports on YouTube. And Matt, I hope that the Red Sea, the Bird Gang, has been welcoming to you.
I'm just glad to be at a point now where getting closer to the point of finality, not only with the Cardinal staff, but coaching moves around the country is starting to reach a quieter point before the craziness of free agency starts in a few weeks.
Matt, we were taken back with your initial report of Nathaniel Hackett. We were on Radio Row. We were doing our show live. That report came out. I mean, how did that whole thing come about in your opinion? Because, we assumed, Mike's going to, poach somebody from the Rams, maybe a Dave Ragone or somebody like that, when in all actuality, he wasn't connected to any other coordinator options, at least publicly, other than Nathaniel Hackett.
There are some connections there, obviously, and just from my standpoint, fortunate to have some good relationships around coaching, front office world, both at the college level and NFL level to go along with that. And like Bo and I talked about previous time, Nathaniel was the initial name that came up for me, and really it was worded strongly enough where it was told that he's the clear name to keep an eye on. And really at the beginning point of the process, it was presented to me as the expected hire. And obviously there's a process that you have to go through before being able to get that to the point of finality. But the Cardinals and Mike LaFleur did a good job discreetly going through that process and getting to the finish line in terms of the interviews and just getting through all of that without names getting out there publicly, to where they were able to get the hire of Nathaniel Hackett done and finalized quicker than I initially expected them to be able to do that.
Yeah, one of the hires that they made that they kind of dragged their feet on and actually interviewed potential replacements. And according to your reporting, Albert Breer's reporting, the Cardinals offered a couple defensive coordinator positions. Gus Bradley, one of those names. Another one popped up, and they interviewed guys like Aubrey Pleasant, Carl Ross from or Scott from the Seahawks. Wink Martindale's name makes it into it. We talk about these relationships. Matt and Mike, obviously brothers there. Sean McVay, Shanahan's in there. You've got the Hackett tie. Rallis obviously directly tied to Jonathan Gannon, the previous head coach here, who's now the DC in Green Bay. I mean, from your standpoint, from your vantage point, how did Nick Rallis make his way back to being Cardinals DC after kind of turning the page on the Gannon era?
It's the end of a very thorough process and search. And like you kind of covered just now, there were a number of different coaches that were vetted and looked into, and that Mike had communication with throughout the course of that process. That there were some, like Gus Bradley, that if he didn't end up elsewhere, probably a decent chance that in Arizona right now. That there are others like the aforementioned Carl Scott, definitely of interest, but at the same time felt good about the situation that he's in Seattle, to the point that passed up multiple DC opportunities elsewhere, including with the Commanders, which he was a definite name of interest for, to go along with Arizona. And that all contributed to the outcome being what it was, with Nick being back now as the defensive coordinator. And that's no knock on Nick whatsoever, just be clear, because if Mike LaFleur doesn't think that he's capable of doing the job, would have continued to look at external options and look to find somebody else. So there was a level of confidence there at the same time, just in terms of his capability to do this. But this definitely was an extensive search and a number of different coaches that were looked into before the outcome was what it was.
Do you think that his brother Matt had any influence on him, just based on his relationship, not only with Jonathan Gannon, who's got a relationship with Nick Rallis, but of course Nathaniel Hackett? Because what we saw over the tenure of Jonathan Gannon here in Arizona, his staff didn't have a ton of experience. Like, how important was that for Mike when putting together this group of guys?
The thing you have to remember with Nick, like going back to when he was originally hired, I'm sure you guys got similar feedback at that point, is what had gotten on my end leading up to that, just very highly thought of in terms of the coaching space. Has it gone as planned since he got there? No. I obviously not groundbreaking in terms of throwing that out, but at the same time, we'll see just if able to make some upgrades in terms of the locker room from a player perspective that maybe could contribute to some of the results and stats and overall production being different than what it's been to this point in this next go around with Nick as the defensive coordinator. But this is somebody who, for what it's worth, despite some of the issues and ups and downs and mixed reviews that you will frankly get, says somebody who that there are a lot of people in the coaching world that still think highly of him as a defensive mind.
I mean, 32 years old, this guy was a rising star. I mean, all signs were pointing towards that before the month of November really kind of kicked in, and then things kind of just fell apart. A lot of good to take away from Rallis' tenure so far, and I guess it didn't completely torpedo his reputation within the facility, and Mike LaFleur liked him enough. But with that, it wasn't without changes across his staff. One of the first times we got kind of some insight from Matt Zenitz was when you reported that Coach Debo was going to Michigan State. He was going to jump ship from the D-line coach, but they've replaced Debo, who was in his late 20s, with a grizzled veteran, nearly 60 years old, former DC from Texas, and Kwiatkowski. I mean, when you just look at the defensive staff changes, anybody stand out as far as the personnel that they brought in?
I mean, you've got a hell of a mix. You have a former player who's having his first row opportunity as a coach, and Matt Schaub. You have some veteran figures like the Pete Kwiatkowskis of the world, and then you have some up-and-comers like some of the college coaches that hired, including the two from University of Miami. So I think it's a nice mixture there, including just factoring in some coaches that Mike LaFleur has pre-existing relationships with to go along with others that have established themselves as either up-and-comers in the coaching world or just have earned good reputations to the point that now have been hired as a part of this staff.
You've been as locked in as anybody when the staff has been made public. Do you have any insight as it relates to the next phase, which is going to be who Mike LaFleur inevitably chooses as his quarterback? We know Kyler Murray is set to be traded and or released here in the next couple of weeks. Any insight to a potential free agent that the Cardinals could look at, assuming that Mike LaFleur is going to play a big part in that?
So I've been so locked in when it comes to the coaching part of this that I honestly have been, I don't want to say out of the loop in terms of the player side of this, but now that things calm down from a coaching standpoint, can start to dig in more when it comes to that part. But I think you guys and I have the same kind of expectation when it comes to Kyler. And I'm sure most people have the same kind of feel at this point in terms of what the likely outcome is when it comes to him and his future in Arizona.
Last question. I want to circle back to the coaching staff. Given when Mike LaFleur was hired, second to last coach hired during this cycle, probably the last if you count Kubiak, who's all signs pointing to him going to the Raiders, despite the Cardinals' interest until the very end. Did you see or hear of any struggles as far as LaFleur trying to build this staff so late in the process with a lot of the good coordinators and assistants gobbled up by the other 9 vacancies and other vacancies that just popped up around the league?
I would say one of the biggest things that came up with this staff, and this goes back to the head coaching part of it also, that there were some concerns about the infrastructure part of it, and that was something that was of concern. And this is just being completely real, open, candid, that there was a concern for some different coaches that were looked into, even going back to the head coaching part of it. But I do think there's a level of confidence for people in the coaching world in Mike LaFleur to where when he was eventually hired as the head coach, put together a staff now that you do have some intriguing figures there. And I know with like the Nick Rallis retention, it didn't seem like that was particularly well received by the Arizona fan base. But at the same time, to go along with the retentions with Nick or Justin Fry or Christian Garcia, who will be shifting to coaching safeties now, or Matt Feeney, so some of those guys that were there previously, you do add some respected figures around the coaching world to go along with that, in addition to just says some other interesting figures. Like for me, I'm legitimately curious to see just what Matt Shaw becomes as a coach now. I have obviously played in the NFL for a long time, and that's somebody who, just looking at his profile, that's somebody who you would think would make for a hell of a coach whenever decide to go that route. Now gets his first opportunity. That's somebody that, if I'm a quarterback, I would think would be able to learn a decent amount from. And then a big piece that left out from a retention perspective is Connor Sanger. So Connor, and this is far from a secret at this point, has established himself as a huge up-and-comer in the coaching world, had multiple offensive coordinator interviews this cycle, had multiple quarterback coach interviews this cycle. I believe Connor is still just 30 years old, and the way that he was described by one of the teams that interviewed him for OC job was that he was the second most impressive external interview that they had. And it was Seattle who eventually hired Brian Fleury. But Connor was described by someone in Seattle as actually not only the second most impressive external person that they interviewed for that spot, but probably the second most impressive overall interview. And it was added in. He's not there yet, but he's extremely, extremely impressive.
Matt, you've been impressive. The MVP of the Cardinals coaching search on Twitter. Give him a follow on all social accounts. NFL college football reporter for CBS Sports. Hope to have you back on the show, my guy.
Sounds good, guys. I appreciate it.